Aaron, what's up, buddy?
What's going on? Is
You
this
guys can,
Kevin?
you guys can. No, it's Bobby.
Bobby, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Hey, doing pretty good. Before we get started here, you guys can follow Aaron on Instagram at Aaron Torres Pod from Fox Sports Radio, the Aaron Torres Podcast, writing for the Atlantic. Aaron's on with us. First question, Aaron, is UConn. How much of a beast are they, and how badly will they just destroy Arkansas?
I mean, listen, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. First of all, nobody destroys Coach Muss in the tournament. He's unbelievable. And I know how much you love Arkansas. This is a really good UConn. No. Listen. This is a really good UConn team. What I would say is, look, this is a really good UConn team. I am a UConn alum, but in the preseason, not preseason, but the early out-of-conference portion of play, they just destroyed everybody. I mean, they took care of business. They beat Alabama by double digits. They beat Iowa State. They beat Michigan State, who's obviously in the Sweet 16. And then they hit, a little bit of a tough patch when league play starts. And I think sometimes, league play, people know you. They had a tough early start to the schedule. They had to play at Xavier right away. Xavier's obviously a Sweet 16 team, Marquette, et cetera. But they played really well probably the last 5 or 6 weeks. And so I think this is a matchup between two elite coaches. There's elite talent on both sides of the floor. I'll just tell you straight up, I actually think this might be – I actually think that the two games in the West might be the two best games that we have all weekend.
Also referring to UCLA Gonzaga.
Yes.
And so –
yeah, no, I think that one's going to be awesome too. I don't know if you want to talk about that one, but I think that's going to be a great game as well.
Yeah, let's do it because you have UCLA that, weeks ago – arguably their best player, and not offensively, but defensively, he was a beast. He's injured, he's out for the season, but it looks like they really haven't missed a beat. How you feeling about this matchup?
I just think it's really fascinating, and I mean, obviously, as somebody who loves this sport, sometimes I'm man enough to admit when I have no idea how a game's going to go. I mean, what's interesting about UCLA, as you just said, Bobby, a really key player to what they do and what put them in position to have a 2 seed to begin with is out for the year and has been out since the Pac-12 tournament. Well, they go to the Pac-12 tournament. They probably should have beaten Arizona to win the Pac-12 tournament. And then really, I don't want to say they cruised into the Sweet 16 because they did struggle with Northwestern a little bit on Saturday. That's a really good team. But at the same time, this Gonzaga team, it's Gonzaga's so fascinating because it's one of those deals where it's like, they don't really have any pressure on them for the first time in forever. Nobody expects them to do much damage in this tournament. So that's one where I'll be honest, actually, it's a lot like the Arkansas-UConn game too. Like, I have no great feel for how these games are going to go down. I'm just excited to consume them, excited to watch it.
You know what I'm curious about, because I know you wrote the One and Done, which was the look at John Calipari and the 2010 Kentucky Wildcat team. Just knowing Calipari, at least about what he does and how he does it, probably a little more than I do, even though, I'm a massive college basketball fan and have, UK friends and fans in my life. John Calipari, Kentucky, is that running its course at this point?
It's such a great, it's the question everybody in college basketball is asking. And, I think there's a few things. One, first of all, it's a tournament-based sport, right? And so, I'm somebody personally that's been critical of a Matt Painter at Purdue. I've been critical of a Rick Barnes at Tennessee. So I have to be critical of John Calipari as the highest-paid coach in college basketball. It's now since 2019 that he has not made the second weekend, and obviously 2015 now, so that's 8 full years since he's made a Final Four as the highest-paid coach in the sport. At the same time, I do think that narrative is probably a little bit unfair because in 2020, he had a team good enough to win the national championship. Obviously, there's no tournament. Last year, he has Kentucky as a 2 seed, so it's not as though they were a colossal failure, but they had a colossal letdown in the NCAA tournament. And then this year, listen, we can pick apart what happened on Sunday against Kansas State. They had the lead with under 4 minutes to go and couldn't hold on. And so, this is what makes the tournament great. It's one and done. You go home. And I don't think you can deny that the results are not what they are expected to be, not just because it's Kentucky, but because it's Kentucky with a prominent coach who has proven the ability to do this before. But then on the flip side, again, you're paid $8 million. This is a results-driven business. If you want to coach for free and hand out orange slices at halftime, you can go do that and get a lot less money, and the results don't matter as much. So it's one of those I actually understand both sides of the Kentucky fan base, those who have said it has definitively run its course, it's time to start over, and those that have said, those that remember, by the way, Bobby, and I know you remember as well, what was it like before Calipari, missing the NCAA tournament, NITs, early exits. It can be worse, but I also understand those that expect it to be better, if that makes sense.
I was watching Calipari do a press conference. He's talking about the recruiting class coming in, which is amazing, probably number one. 2 7-footers could start next year. But it feels like this is what is said every single year, where they continue to have a top number one class, and they're like, yeah, it didn't work out this year, but boy, do we got it loaded up for next year. Doesn't it feel like it's the same thing every single year?
You know, I have a buddy in sports media, and I hope he's not a competitor of yours because I'm going to drop his name, and I hope it doesn't ruffle any feathers. But Colin Cowherd's a friend of mine, and for years he has called John Calipari John Caliponzi. And basically the argument is it's this Ponzi scheme of, you know, the fans get mad, but then you sell them, wait till next year. When we get this recruiting class in, wait till next year. And it's just this never-ending cycle. And I think what Calipari has proven is as long as he is there, he's going to have a team that's good enough to win it. And so, again, you know, you go back to, you know, like let's just say hypothetically there was a way for Kentucky to force him out, and there isn't right now with his contract. Somebody would hire him, and he would go there, and next year they would have a team that's good enough to win the national championship. And so it's just this incredible kind of push-pull of, you know, if you're Kentucky, like I think in the perfect world, Kentucky in the next 2 or 3 years, they go on one more great run, maybe with that recruiting class that you just referenced, Bobby. And Calipari realizes it's the end and he retires. Now, I think Calipari's too stubborn to do that, to be perfectly honest. But, you know, that's what you would hope happens if you're a Kentucky fan. But I don't see it happening. And so, again, whether it's you force them out, whether it's the under, it's a very complicated, like I guess the best way I could put it, Bobby, is it's a very complicated situation. And there's no, like, I think in society now, we want a black, white, yes, no, this is that. And it's kind of a fluid thing, right? There's no definitive, he's definitively past his prime, he's got to go. It's no definitively he's at the top of his game. It's somewhere in that gray area, which makes it fascinating. But yes, to your point, Bobby, and I think it's a great one, is the idea that I do think it has come to a point where Kentucky fans are tired of hearing about how great the recruiting class is. They want to see the actual results deep into March on the actual basketball court.
I was watching a Nick Saban press conference yesterday, and you know they had a player they kind of booted off the team for a little bit. He was going like 150 miles an hour or whatever. And Nick Saban said from the podium, "There's no such thing as wrong place, wrong time." You know, referring to Brandon Miller, who plays for the Alabama basketball team, and that's what Nate Oates said about Brandon Miller. He's at the wrong place at the wrong time. I mean, Saban, right down the hall, guy working over there, is like, there's no such thing as wrong place at the wrong time. Like, we actually, you know, our guys, they have a potential they have to live up to, and if they don't. So when he says that, I mean, do you think that Nate Oates and this program are feeling any more pressure right now, this deep in the tournament, or are they just doing their thing and they'll deal with it when it's over?
You know, first off, if you believe the Alabama spin, it was a total coincidence that Nick Saban, in a pre-prepared statement, I think this is the part that, you know, nobody's talking about, is this wasn't, he was asked about the situation at a press conference and he kind of off the top of his head. He had a pre-prepared statement to lead the press conference. And then, oh, by the way, Nick Saban is one of the great coaches I've ever seen at using the media to deliver a message. So I am with you. Alabama can tell us whatever they want. I do not believe in any way, shape, or form that it was coincidental that he used that exact term. But I bring it up to say, you know, on the court, Bobby, I got to be honest. I thought it would impact them by now, but it hasn't seemed to impact them, all the off-the-court distractions. I will say, you know, they're going to have, although the region by numbers and by seeding doesn't look great on paper, that San Diego State team they're going to play is a real team that tomorrow night, or Friday night, they're great defensively, and I think that's going to be one of the tougher matchups that Alabama has. And then even if they survive that, I do think Creighton, which was a preseason top 10 team, could give them fits as well. So, you know, I think, again, it's kind of a fluid situation where putting aside what clearly happened in that Tuscaloosa community and putting aside the conversation of whether this kid should be playing at all, Alabama has decided they are playing him. I think they've actually done a pretty good job on the court of blocking out the noise, but you wonder as the stage gets bigger, as more media shows up, all of those things, you do wonder if at some point it does start to affect them on the court.
I got two final things to ask you here. I want to talk about Tennessee for a second. I've, for years, talked about Rick Barnes when he was at Texas and then at Tennessee. He's going to let you down at some point. That has just kind of been his calling card. I think he's a great coach. I think he's a really good dude, but known for choking. And so here they are, Sweet 16, playing a team they should beat, Florida Atlantic. Or if you listen to this afterward, if they win, they'll be playing the winner of the Kansas State-Michigan State game. But Rick Barnes this season, has that looked a bit different than Rick Barnes any other season? And are you expecting one of these Barnes collapses?
It's really funny. In all of my coverage of all of this, I have not once talked about, an advantageous path for Tennessee or anything like that, because I'm enough of a historian to know that, Tennessee basketball is probably going to let you down at some point. And so I bring all this up to just say, when I look at the situation with Tennessee, I'll say this, and I've been pretty consistent with this, even before this run. I think there have been plenty of years where the criticism of Rick Barnes is justified. This year, they have dealt with a ton of injuries. Their best players have been in and out of the lineup all year. And I don't want to say it's been like an elite coaching job that we're going to be talking about 50 years from now, we're going to be telling our grandkids about or anything. But I do think there is something to the fact that I think he's done a good job in this particular season, given the obstacles that they've had to overcome. Now, with that said, you lose to Florida Atlantic on, tomorrow night. None of it will matter. None of it will matter, and none of it will be remembered, and nobody will care about injuries. It's Florida Atlantic. You're Tennessee. You're from the SEC. They're from Conference USA. This is a game you're supposed to win. So, again, Bobby, I'll be honest. I feel like I'm just giving you, two-sided answers. Nothing is a definitive yes or no hot take. I think he's done a good job. I think he's done a good job this year, all things considered. I don't think any of it will matter or any of it will be remembered if you lose a Sweet 16 game to Florida Atlantic tomorrow night.
I agree with that. Final is Princeton, a 15 seed. Because Creighton's tough. I think Creighton's probably a little underseeded with how good they have been, especially in the tournament. They've looked good. They're a 10-point favorite over Princeton. In any way Princeton pulls this out?
Yeah, listen, I think there's definitely a way because they being two good teams to get here. And I think the Missouri game to me was even more telling because Arizona had been kind of up and down all year. They played up to their competition against the league teams, down to the competition when they were playing teams that they thought were inferior. But the Missouri game, Missouri was, you're an SEC guy, was pretty consistent all year long. And so I just bring it up because I thought that performance was actually maybe a little bit more impressive than the other one. But I also do think there is something to the adage that in general, when a team has 4 or 5 days to prepare for you, you're not going to sneak up on them like in the first round. You don't have a short turnaround like in the second round. When you have those 4 or 5 days where the coach can say, hey, you just saw what they did to Arizona. You saw what they did to Missouri. They'll do it to you if you're not ready. I tend to think Creighton will come out and take care of business tomorrow. But then again, you can use the analogy from last year with St. Peter's. Purdue had a week to prepare for them, and St. Peter's still beat them to go to an Elite Eight. So I'm fascinated. This is another one that I'm super intrigued by, but I do think the road for Princeton probably ends tomorrow night or Friday night in Louisville.
The host of the Aaron Torres podcast, a host on Fox Sports Radio every Saturday night. And last question, Arkansas and UConn. No, UConn minus 3.5. Go ahead. Who do you got?
I'm telling you, I'm being perfectly honest. And by the way, if you have to get to a break, cut me off at any point. I don't know how I feel about this game because the thing is, they play such similar styles. They want to bully you. They want to beat you up. They're both super big, super athletic, and they both have real deficiencies too. Arkansas doesn't shoot the ball well. I think UConn has good shooting, but sometimes the point guard play is a little bit iffy, and they have this wing named Andre Jackson who's really talented, but he goes through offensive struggles. And so, I don't know what to say.
Bet your money. Fictional $100. You have a fictional $100. Who you betting it on? UConn minus 3.5, or are you taking Arkansas on the points?
Either way, I'm screwed because you either hate me or my alma mater hates me. So it's like, I will say, I've known Coach Musk dating back to the Nevada days. I think he might be the best tournament coach going. You give him 4 days to prepare. I'll tell you what, I will take Arkansas plus the points and leave it very vague who I'm picking to win this game. How's that sound, bud?
Doesn't sound very vague, but I like it. All right, there he is. You guys follow him on Instagram at Aaron Torres Pod, the Aaron Torres Podcast. And again, he's a host on Fox Sports Radio. Aaron, thank you for your time, buddy. Hope you're good.